EAGLES, Eagles.
Thursday morning edition of Birds 365 with Birds insider John McMullen. I'm Joe Krause sitting in the big chair, and as we move into Masters Thursday today, John, I want to begin the show first with a huge big thank you to our pal Jody Mack, who went co-host with you for the first 3 years of Birds 365. And when I spoke to Jody the other day, he wasn't going to miss getting up at 6:30. He wasn't going to miss booking the guest all the time, but he was going to miss working with John McMullen.
Yeah, I appreciate that from Jody. And, you know, it was a lot of fun. I got to do this show with him for 3 years, you know, and we throw the word around legend and probably a little bit too much. But in the world of sports talk radio, Jody McDonald is a true legend. He's been doing it for a very long time. And yeah, Jody, you know, people used to love when we argued, thought we were angry at each other. But yeah, you know, as soon as the show ended, we were friends, never anything like that. I appreciate everything he's done for me and everything he's done for this show. Just tremendous. You can't say enough good things about Jody McDonald.
No doubt about it. He will be missed on Birds 365. And even though there is always change in the world, there are certainly, you certainly become part of the memory and part of the history as Birds 365 continues to roll forth. So, Jody Mack, you're probably not seeing this message of thanks or salute to you as we begin the show. You're sleeping. But we'll play it back for you. Good stuff. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in and being a part of Birds 365. I'll ride shotgun today and tomorrow with Johnny Mack. Johnny Mack, the Eagles home, or not the home opener, but the Eagles.
It is the home opener. It just
it is the home opener. It is now decided.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like it. You know, Jody and I, we would go back and forth about, and we whittled it down to two teams, Green Bay and Cleveland. He won that one. I thought it would be Cleveland from the perspective of, I thought the Eagles would push for Cleveland because they're giving up a home game, right? So, you know, if you think about it from the perspective of competitive advantage, which is a big thing with Nick Sirianni, it's becoming a lesser thing with Jeffrey Lurie as he gets more involved into the business end of the equation. But I mean, the Packers are in the NFC and they're supposed to be a playoff contender next year. And you're giving up a home game against Green Bay that would have been at Lincoln Financial Field. And you can imagine if you fast forward to week 18 and the Packers beat the Eagles in Sao Paulo, Brazil, there's no guarantee the Eagles were going to beat them in Lincoln Financial Field. But my point is, it's a home game. It's easier to win at home than in a neutral field, neutral site, where the Eagles are an early 1.5 favorite. But yeah, I can see that being a talking point down the line if everything sort of unfurls that particular way. But Jeffrey Lurie's changed a lot. We talked this with Les Bowen the other day, and Les has been around Jeffrey for basically the entire quarter century plus. I only got back in 2016-ish. And he was against this kind of stuff for a long, long time. The international games, he didn't want to give up Eagles home games and all that kind of stuff. Now, sometimes you have to. The league has put things in place where teams have to do it at some point. But you know, Jeffrey would always beg off as much as possible. And now he just spoke at the annual NFL meetings, and you saw a different Jeffrey Lurie understands that maybe, you know, if the league wants to continue to grow at the level it's been growing, they have to open up international markets and maybe from a big picture standpoint, the NFL, it's more important to have Eagles, Packers, two marquee teams for the first game in Brazil than it is to have a home game, at least. Yeah, but fans aren't going to agree with that. Let's face it, Krause, most Eagles fans aren't going to Brazil, so they're losing a home game. But that's the way of the world. Revenue. How do you open up more revenue streams? And the NFL is looking to do that in international markets.
John, excuse the ignorance of this question, but did the Eagles have a say in the opponent? Was that a conversation between the team and the league when that game was being decided?
Yeah, I mean they have a say. I mean the league ultimately is going to do what they want to do, but in the past, Jeffrey, as I said, has been pushed back pretty hard. I don't get the sense that he pushed back hard on this particular instance. And Cleveland is a marquee team as well. They're a playoff team. They're getting Deshaun Watson back. They project to be a pretty good team on the AFC side as well. Their fans travel pretty well, so. But they're not the Packers. The Packers are one of those, really top five probably teams in the league from a branding standpoint, and a lot of that has to do with going through 30 years of consecutive Hall of Fame quarterback play with Brett Favre seamlessly into Aaron Rodgers, and now they're into Jordan Love, and he looks really good. I'm not going to put him in the Hall of Fame, but he had a great first season as a starting quarterback. It's a very high-profile team, and clearly the NFL wants to make a splash with their first game in Brazil. And I don't think the Eagles had much of a say, because if they did, they probably would have picked Cleveland for the reasons I gave you. I mean, it's just common sense. If they're not going to be battling Cleveland for a playoff spot, you never want to lose an NFL game because there's only 17 of them. But we always talk, if you're going to lose a game, it's better to lose an out of conference game, because it's not going to hurt you nearly as much in tiebreakers and things like that.
It's a Friday night game, John. Is it earlier this year than what it normally would be? September 5th, I think, is the scheduled date for the game. So it would be previous to what would be the normal Thursday night kickoff for the NFL, which would be the following Thursday. Am I right with that?
I haven't. Well, the kickoff game is still going to be Thursday. This is going to be the second game of the season. It's not the kickoff game, but I haven't looked at the calendar. That generally just has to do with the calendar and where it is and where Labor Day is and all that kind of stuff. So I haven't looked at that just yet, but I don't think it's they moved it up for a particular game. They just would have played their normal Friday before after the Thursday game and before the Sunday game. So that part of it
that just seems early to me. That would put the Thursday game on the 4th of September,
September
and Labor
5th.
Day would be the 8th of September. So is it a pre-start to the season before Labor Day this year?
You know better than I if you looked at the calendar. So yeah, if Labor Day is on the 8th, yeah.
Take a quick peek here.
I mean, if from the perspective of the league pushing back the Super Bowl as far as it does, remember, eventually they want to get to 18 games. So,
and Labor Day is the 2nd, so I am corrected.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Labor Day is the 2nd, so that Thursday, and then this will be game 2.
So it's Labor Day is a little bit earlier this year, so they generally start right after Labor Day. So that part hasn't changed. That's just what the calendar is this year.
And Eagle fans will have 7 home games that they will be able to attend, and then 9 games on the road, plus the game in Brazil. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, I think the Eagles have the extra home game this year. I can pull that up because remember it's an unbalanced schedule. So when they went to 17 games, and eventually they'll try to go to 18, and it'll be somewhat balanced again. It's never balanced, but you get my point. So their home games are obviously Dallas, Giants, Washington, Atlanta, Carolina. Green Bay's a home game, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville. So, yeah, they have the extra home game this year. So they will still have 8 home games at Lincoln Financial Field. Their 9th home game they've given up for San Paulo. So that part of it helps a little bit. You're still going to get eight home games. But again, other than the Dallas Cowboys, for obvious reasons, maybe Pittsburgh because of the interstate rivalry and that kind of thing. It's probably the biggest home game. And I would argue it is the biggest home game after Dallas. Green Bay does come in here a ton. And as I said, a marquee opponent. So, yeah, I don't love the international games, but, the league wants to open revenue. So, you got to be a team player if you're Jeffrey Lurie.
We'll see what happens. We'll certainly see what happens. And I don't know how many Eagle fans are going to travel to Brazil, John. I don't even know if you're going to travel to Brazil.
Well, for everyone, you got to get your passports up to date. You got to get a visa if you're from what I've been told. So yeah, that's going to be a cluster. You know what? They are playing the first game in Madrid this year, I believe. Yeah, Madrid. I wish the game was in Madrid more than Brazil, but that's just me. What could you do?
8:20 today in the first hour of Birds 365. Bob Brookover will be your guest from NJ.com. I assume the context of the conversation, John, upcoming NFL draft.
Yeah, 2 weeks from today. So we are T minus, you mentioned Masters. We are 2 minus 2 weeks for the NFL draft. And obviously, yeah, that's going to be, it's always big for every NFL team. But from the Eagles' perspective, starting at 22, have 3 picks in the top 53. And then you kind of have the little pause because right now they don't have a 3rd round pick, and they wouldn't pick up again till 120 on day 3. But yeah, the Eagles need to make those first 3 picks count, and we know Howie Roseman is going to move around the board. Just in recent seasons, he's made it a theme for those targeted trades up, whether it's Devonta Smith, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter last year. Whatever he does, he's got to make those 3 first for day 2 picks, 22, day 1 and day 2, 22 in the first round, 50 and 53. He's got to make them count. And that doesn't mean 3 players. It could be using them to move up to get one player he really wants. In the 2nd round, could be in the 1st round, could use a 2nd round pick to move up, could move down. He hasn't done that recently, but I don't like that spot for the Eagles, 22. I look at it.
His best picks, John, come well before pick 22.
Well, everybody's do. Part of that is because I hear that a lot. Well, no duh. If you're picking 10th or 9th, that as they traded up, they get, say, Devonta Smith at 10th and Jalen Carter at 9th last year. Yeah, I mean, you got a better chance to get a better player the higher you are in the draft than you do down in the early 20s.
Well, based on need, based on what you've zeroed in. If you've zeroed in on, hey, we're going to pick an offensive line, we're going to pick an offensive lineman, then you're not as inclined based on who's picking ahead of you to make a trade or make a deal to move up to get the lineman, are you?
Well, the Eagles are generally very good, and that's why they always try to, in free agency, they always try to what I call draft proof the roster and at least have players at each position to where if the board doesn't fall the way you want it to, you can feel somewhat comfortable playing them. Um, it's not perfect, but they generally do it as good as anybody. So that's they're not going to go into the draft and say and we're taking an offensive lineman or we're taking a cornerback or we're taking insert name. They're and I say it all the time, and I mentioned it yesterday on the show. Brian Billick's the first one who told me it, but a lot of people have said it over the years. Need is the worst talent evaluator in sports. In other words, if you're just going to pick an offensive lineman because you need an offensive lineman, or you're going to pick a cornerback because you pick a cornerback and you say so and so is better, but I need a corner, it's probably not going to work out well for you. And the Eagles will not do that. They're one of the smarter teams in the NFL. Um, Even if they have to wait, a lot of people have, it's never sexy when you take an offensive lineman. And there's a ton of good tackles in this draft. It set to go in the first round, projected to go in the first round. And you're sitting there with Jordan Mailata, who you just paid $60+ million again. And Lane Johnson's still here playing at a high level. And you say, well, why are you going to take a tackle? It's more from Howie's perspective, Howie Roseman's perspective, it's always about more than 1 year, but also it's about, getting the better player. You're not going to take a lesser player at a position just because you have that need, or you shouldn't. Teams do it all the time, and it generally doesn't work out very well, to be honest.
Well, how does it work, John? You're in the Howie and the brass are in the draft room, and at the top of the whiteboard, they have or draft board. They've identified players that they like, and they're identified by the position they play or where they should be picked.
But you have a vertical and a horizontal board, and basically when you get to each pick, like the tip, we'll take 22 for example. The Eagles understand there's going to be a group of players that aren't going to be there at 22, and they're very cognizant of that and the understanding that Marvin Harrison Jr., for instance, he's not going to be there, so you don't have to worry about that. Malik Neighbors, any of the wide receivers, that's in sort of underreported position that they might, go for somewhere in those top 3 picks. But there's certain guys, aren't going to be there. Generally, you have a cloud of prospects for a particular spot. In this case, it'll be 22. And I'll use the Devonta Smith year. The Eagles started that year. They actually started at 6, moved back to 12, and then moved back up to 10. But when they were at 12, they had a group of 4 players that they hoped would fall to them at 12. And 3 of them, Jalen Waddle, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, were off the board. And there was only one left, Devonta Smith. And the New York Giants were picking ahead of them. And the Eagles knew that the Giants were going to pick Devonta Smith. So they traded above the Giants to get the player that they wanted. And they thought there was a drop-off after that. Had they not been able to work out that trade, ironically with Dallas, they might have traded back to the next group of players. And they felt because you got to match up the evaluation of the player with the evaluation of the spot. And if you think somebody's not worthy of going 22nd, you shouldn't take him at 22nd. So, if their cloud of players that they want at 22 aren't there, or they can't get up to get one, they might consider trading down. So the trick to it all is sort of, but it all comes down to getting the player right. I mean, Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, Andre Dillard. You got to get the player right. And sometimes it's easier said than done.
Hour number 2 of Birds 365. We'll talk more about Devonta Smith. I think it was Tim McManus that put the story out that the Eagles are now potentially, I guess, looking to sign Devonta Smith to a long-term deal. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it now, but what do you know? Is it close? Is it far away? Where is that conversation? It's on the front burner, I assume. Whether or not they get there, I don't know.
Well, they want to get it done, but
they want to get it done now, or they want to wait for they want to.
Oh, they always want it. I mean, the Eagles are famous for targeting young players that they think are going to be foundational pieces and trying to extend them early, because they know the price is never going down. It's always going up. And in the case of Devonta Smith, it's even more obvious where the market's going, because Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are eligible for extensions. So I said it's always in Devonta. It's in Devonta's court, obviously. The Eagles want to get this done early, and they want to get it done before Jefferson resets the market and Chase resets the market, because the old rising tide lifts all boats a quote, that as those guys exploded to over 30 million a year average annual value, Devonta's not going to get that much, but those guys behind them, it will increase what they're going to get. So if Devonta Smith wants to bet on himself, he can make a lot of money if he waits for Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. On the other hand, if he wants to make life-changing money right now, and he wants it right now, say $25 million a year, the Eagles will probably be willing to sign that today if he would agree to that. So, look, I've said it pretty consistently on the show, if I were Devonta Smith, I would wait. The Eagles still have the 5th-year option at their disposal. There's no time crunch. With Landon Dickerson, he was a second-round pick, so you only have 4 years. You don't have that 5th-year option. And even the Eagles made him at the time the highest paid guard in the NFL. But it's a very cost-effective deal. It's just going to keep going up and going up and going up. So the Eagles are willing to give Devonta Smith a lot of money right now. But if he wants to be Kirk Cousins and squeeze every nickel out of what he can potentially his earning power, he should wait. He should wait, because Justin Jefferson is going to make well over 30 million a year, and Jamar Chase as well. And that will elevate all the players behind them.
As we go to our first break here on Birds 365, I wonder how AJ Brown will react when
that's why you use 25.
That new deal comes out.
You can't, Krause, you can't go above 25. And that is the reason why. Because if you go above, we just went through this to not a perfect analogy, but with Hassan Reddick, I would tell Jody all the time, look, Hassan Reddick's not playing for the Philadelphia Eagles for less money than Bryce Huff. So you had to get him over Bryce Huff. AJ's not playing for less money than Devonta Smith. So you can't go above AJ's money. That makes it more complicated as well.
Bird 365 with John McMullen, Joe Krause sitting in the chair today as we go to our first commercial break. One reminder, and I know Jody has reminded the listening audience or our viewers about Del Val Insurance. I do want to draw your attention to Del Val Insurance. Save up to 40% on your car insurance. No BS. It's real. 215-354-0122. Fran and Jim are the managing partners. Two great guys. I have Del Val Insurance. I have used Del Val Insurance. They are legit, and they are the real deal. Back in a moment.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services. The first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Back here on Birds 365 with John McMullen, Joe Krause sitting in the chair today. The first day without our good friend Jody Mack, who was part of the broadcast and part of Birds 365 for 3 full seasons, John. I guess the total number of shows as we begin and go into season number 4 of Birds 365. I know you guys debated often what the actual number was. I'm gonna side with you on what that right amount is, at least.
It's not even me.
But what a lot of great Birds 365 content.
Yeah, it's not even me. I take YouTube at their word because they got so they're at 753. This is show number 753, and we titled it Birds 365 because you can go there 365 24/7. We have football 24/7 as well. Anytime on the YouTube channel and watch any of the interviews, which I wish Bob Brookover was here. I'm efforting to get Brookie.
Is he coming on or what? He was supposed to be here.
He's supposed to be here. He's probably sleeping. it happens sometimes early in the morning. So hopefully he answers his text. But I thought Brookie, and for those who've been around Philadelphia for a long time, tremendous writer, used to work for the Inquirer, covered the Phillies, Eagles, everybody over the years. But recently he was covering the New York Giants before he came back to the Eagles beat. And I think that's a good guy to get on to talk about Saquon Barkley because of everything that went on with Saquon Barkley with the Giants. And obviously things didn't work out the way anybody would have wanted up there. But, anybody who talks about Saquon just has wonderful things to say about him as a person, and as a player for that matter. It's just, the Giants were a bad football team, and bad football teams really aren't going to be able to take advantage of top tier running backs because you're not in a position to win football games, close football games, especially in this era where passing the football is so important. So you have that aspect from the Giants, and understandably why it didn't work out. They took him number 2 overall. And then the Eagles, look, it's so uncharacteristic. Howie can talk about whatever he wants. He tried to downplay it. And I've said on this show, and I've said for years, and now it's been confirmed by many outside sources, the Eagles were going to draft Christian McCaffrey in the 2017 draft. Never got close to them. The Eagles were 14. He ended up, I believe, going number 8 to Carolina. And they weren't able to go up that high to get him. And it's what could have been. But they always loved the player. And they loved the player because of his ability to not only dominate the running game, but also dominate in the passing game. You're talking about a guy. I remember talking to scouts leading up to that draft, and they said he ran better routes than the receivers at the combine. That's how good he was as a route runner. His dad obviously was a big-time former NFL receiver. And that turned out to be true. Everything about him. He the 1 year in Carolina, he had, over 1,000 yards rushing, well over and over 1,000 yards receiving. Just a phenomenal player. And you saw what he did for San Francisco when they traded for him. And that's what the Eagles are trying to duplicate, to have that presence on the field. But I just don't see I've been pretty above board with that. Saquon's a very good player. They're not comparable as receivers. Saquon's a good receiver for a running back. For a running back, he's a good receiver. Christian McCaffrey's just a good receiver.
Well, how big of an impact is he going to have, John? I mean, how different is the offense going to look with Barkley?
That's the big question. The Eagles think he's a special player. That's their term. That's the term Howie used.
But what does that mean? Like, what does that mean in terms of the game plan, in terms of how do they look different on offense this year than they did last year?
They better. One, because they have a new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore. Nick Sirianni's on record saying it got stale. So the question is, and a lot of people, and Jalen Hurts is part of this equation as well, Krause, because he's not the type of quarterback who's going to dump the football off to running backs. We've seen it pretty consistently, and that's because when he gets through, progression 1, progression 2, and then maybe you want to dump it off to a running back, he would rather just hold on to the football, make a play himself. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. He's been effective doing that. So to get a running back involved in the passing game means you have to design plays for them. Is Jalen Hurts a good screen quarterback? Not conventionally. Are you going to run real wheel routes, manufactured touches? We've seen no evidence of that to this point. Now, they haven't had this type of back before, so maybe it picks up. Although, this is what we heard about DeAndre Swift last year when he came in. He's a great receiver. They didn't utilize them. Those bubble screens they use, I've talked about it all the time. I said, instead of throwing that stupid bubble screen to a receiver, throw it to the running back. Throw it to DeAndre Swift, who could at least potentially make that first tackler miss as a runner. Maybe they do that with Saquon Barkley. But I will say this. The worst third receiver in football is better than the best running back in football when it comes to catching. So they have Paris Campbell, for instance. Not going to excite anybody. But for those who think they're going to put Saquon Barkley in the slot and use him as a receiver that way, you're giving an NFL slot cornerback a day off if you're matching them up against a running back. So I don't like the fit. I've been honest about that, but we'll see how it works out.
Do you like the fit if Saquon Barkley gets more touches as a traditional running back?
Well, he's better than Miles Sanders, and he's better than DeAndre Swift. But
that's my point. That's what I'm wondering. Is that the real reason?
I don't think it is. And I'll say this: Miles Sanders, 2022, 1,269 yards, 4.9 yards per carry, 11 touchdowns. If you go back 2021, 2020, Miles had some injuries, obviously, but he averaged 5.5 yards a carry, 5.3 yards per carry. That's pretty stinking good. DeAndre Swift was over 1,000 yards last year at 4.6 yards per carry. How much better are you going to get?
Well, that's what I'm trying. Even when they made the decision to get Saquon, that's the disconnect for me. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, how much better, how much more do you get out of Saquon if you run a similar offense based on the weapons that you have, starting with Jalen Hurts? How different can it be?
And it's probably, and that's part of the, I'll be the first. Jody was the stats guy. I'm not a stats guy. I don't think football's a statistical game like baseball or something of that nature. There is something to the presence on the field. If he makes things easier for others and it results in winning football games, that's valuable. But it's really hard when you say, well, if he gets 1,200 yards and 4.6 yards per carry and is actually worse than Miles Sanders, he still might have a bigger impact on the team because the defense is going to be more honed in on trying to stop Saquon Barkley because they think he's a better player. They're going to put more assets into stopping Saquon Barkley, and that might make things easier for others. But that's very esoteric is the word I always use. Jordan Davis. I said from day one, Krause, when they drafted him, I said, this guy's a really good player, but I don't know if it's going to, I don't know if it's going to translate to people's thoughts and beliefs because he's not a stat guy. What he does is he gobbles up blockers and makes it easier for everybody else to go make the plays. And that's a very, very important role. But here we are going into year 3, and you got a bunch of people saying he's a disappointment. He's not this, he's not that, because he doesn't sack the quarterback. To be blunt, they don't understand his role. That's not his role. So you're dealing with all this as a football team, and people are going to look at Saquon Barkley and say, "You better put up numbers." To me, he better make the Eagles a better offense. I don't care if he puts up numbers, but does he help everybody else, and does he make it easier for Jalen Hurts? In theory, there's no reason for this offense not to succeed with A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley. And even though they lost Jason Kelce, top 5 offensive line at the bare minimum. No reason for this offense not to succeed. And if it doesn't, we're probably talking about a whole new era, new coaches, new everything.
Wow. John, if Saquon Barkley has a monster year, like perhaps many of the fans expect him to, or hope that he does that make Jalen a better quarterback or worse off?
You know, Jalen, by the way, Jalen's gone under the radar. And understandably so, because there's been so many other issues with the Eagles, and so many other stories, whether it's, you know, Jason's retirement. Fletcher just officially retired earlier this week. So many of the free agent moves and the controversy with Bryce Huff and Hassan Reddick and Saquon, who we just talked about. There's been so much. Jalen's got to get back, or at least closer to where he was in 2022. And I would argue the first 10 games or so of 2023 was still playing 10 or so, somewhere in that range. He's still playing at a very high level. You know, does it help to have other people to get there? Of course it helps to have a great supporting cast. To me, the only difference between Jalen Hurts 2022, 2023 for those first 10 games were the turnovers. He was turning it over a little bit more than he did the year prior. And that happens sometimes. I wasn't that concerned about it. I thought it was an outlier. He's always been very ball security centric. I think that'll regress to the mean. But then down the stretch, like everybody, I mean, the entire team fell apart. It's rare where you see an entire team fall apart like that. And he did seem to get too invested in big plays and too big play centric, not taking what's there. Patrick Mahomes went through this. When Tyreek Hill was in Kansas City, and Kansas City was just destroying people with big plays down the field, is where sort of this big Fangio wave of defense came into the NFL, where everybody was just playing zone coverage, a lot of 2 deep at times, a lot of 3 deep at times, just keeping everything in front of them. And Patrick Mahomes got frustrated, and, you know, he would press a little bit, and then he figured it out. And I think I don't want to compare anybody to Patrick Mahomes. And I'm not trying to compare Jalen Hurts to Patrick Mahomes, but he went through, because the Eagles were such a great big play team in 2022. The adjustment was basically what the Eagles tried to do. Let's keep everything in front of us, stop the big play. And too often Jalen Hurts was forcing the football down the field. And you saw it most notably in the Seattle game, where, look, they were moving the football, could have won the game, just incrementally going down the field. He and AJ go off script, whether you want to call it freelancing, whatever. They took the shot down the field. He threw in the double coverage, interception, game over.
Yeah.
You have to learn from those mistakes and say, all right, if they're not giving it to me, I can't force it.
Will the Eagles have to outscore? Well, let me rephrase it so I make sure I'm clear on it. In order for the Eagles to win, the offense is going to have to be the reason every single time. Yes?
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that was the case last year. I really do think there were some.
Well, it was the case, and I'll let you finish. I didn't want to cut you off there.
No.
It just seemed to me in that collapse, after the fast start, that the offense stopped winning the games in that collapse, where in that first stretch run of 10 wins or whatever it was, no matter what happened on defense, no matter where the breakdown was, the offense was getting the win. I don't think they did that in that collapse at the end of the season last year into the Tampa game.
Well, they did. I mean, look, the end of the season was a disaster. But I do think, and the move from Sean Desai to Matt Patricia still mystifies me. It was an abject disaster. Early in the season, I think people forget the defense at times looked okay. Week 3 at Tampa Bay, they gave up 11 points. They were stifling against Tampa Bay. That was probably their best game of the season. At Los Angeles, they had a bad first half and then a really dominant second half. The Jets is a game they lost. They played very well defensively, but that had more to do with Zach Wilson. Everybody has a good defensive game, so I kind of throw that one out. And then Miami at the time was the most explosive team in football, and they shut them down. I think they gave up 17 points or something like that. So there was this weird narrative that the defense was terrible from week 1 to week 18 and nothing was good about it. And that's simply not the case. And what's weird to me is, and Nick Sirianni confirmed this to me, is that, he started thinking about a change during the bye week, which was week 10, which is 2 weeks after the Miami game, when they were just lights out defensively. And they were 8-1. And I'm like, what? Why are you thinking about a defensive coordinator change when you're 8-1 and you're 2 weeks off shutting down one of the most explosive teams in football? There's always been some kind of weird, and to me, it has nothing to do with football. It has to do with some kind of, I kept hearing that word presence with Sean Desai. He didn't have the presence to be a defensive coordinator. I always go back to Jim Schwartz. When Jim Schwartz walks in a room, he's in charge of the room. He's got this enormous presence.
Well, you earn that presence too, John. I mean,
well, that's the thing.
You don't walk into the room and all of a sudden have, command of presence if you haven't earned that. See, I think the Sirianni decision or the thought process which led to the decision hurt his credit or his clout.
Well, I say that because, I don't get to see, how Sean Desai interacts with people behind the scenes. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's clear he wasn't. Some people just aren't leaders. Maybe it was clear he wasn't that type of guy. He's more understated than Schwartz. Jonathan Gannon had a presence as well. And maybe Nick was right, and he's just not a defensive coordinator. But, if you're just grading on results, well, he was better than Matt Patricia. And he didn't have a lot of talent to work with, especially in the back seven. So I think he was scapegoated a little bit, not a little bit. I think he was scapegoated completely. But the idea, getting back to the original thought of the defense was just terrible from week 1 to week 18, was not the case. You're right. Offensively, there was a significant drop off, and San Francisco destroyed them, Dallas destroyed them, and then you should have won the game in Seattle, and that was Jalen's fault and AJ's fault. And AJ took responsibility, to his credit. You did manage to beat the Giants, terrible football team. Then you lose to Arizona, lose to the Giants, lose to Tampa Bay, and it was just a disaster, leaking oil by that point. But this season, look, you have a proven defensive coordinator. Nobody's going to claim that Vic Fangio doesn't have presence. Believe me. If anybody, I'm not in love with the scheme. Anybody who watches this show for 10 minutes knows that. I've never been in love with the scheme. When Jonathan ran it, Sean ran it. I don't love the scheme. I think too many teams run it. I think when that happens, there's a tipping point and people get too used to it. They're able to prepare for it better. But if you're going to play this scheme, and the Eagles are going to play it, Vic's the guy you want because he's going to teach it the best. And I don't think you're going to have as many communication issues. So I said this about Minnesota last year when they were one of the worst defenses I ever saw with Ed Donatel, who was a Vic Fangio guy. And I said, they hired Brian Flores. And I said, I don't care who they have. They're going to be a top half of the NFL on defense. And they were. They went from 31 or wherever they were to 13, I believe. And they don't have a lot of talent on defense. Same thing I say with Vic. I don't care. They're going to be top half of this league in defense. 16 or above. I'm not saying they're going to be great. I'm not saying they're, have more talent. They lose Hassan Reddick. Sure. They get back Bryce Hupp. We don't know what you're getting. Nolan Smith, CJ's back, CJ Gardner-Johnson. I still hate the linebacker situation. A lot of question marks. But they're going to be better. I guarantee they're going to be better on defense. So, do the Eagles have to win every game offensively? No. I don't think they won every game offensively last year. The defense won the Tampa Bay game, and they won the Rams. They didn't win a lot, but they won some games, and they contributed to winning some games.
Last thought before we go to the break and bring our number one of Birds 365 to a close with John McMullen. In that same thought, John, that the defense is going to be top 15, top 16 in the league. The offense is better right now on paper than a year ago? And if yes, what does that translate to in terms of game by game? More yardage, more points, more ball control, what? Less turnovers? What does it mean?
Well, that's the trick. I'd love to tell you. They're better skill position because Saquon adds to that. Are they better on the offensive line? It's hard to say you're going to be able to replace Jason Kelce seamlessly. So they probably took a little bit of a step back on the offensive line. They have to figure out right guard as well because Cam Jurgens is moving from right guard. So you need two positions to fix. But it's nice when you can lean on Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson. They're still going to have a very good offensive line. So I would say they're going to be fine offensively. I think they'll be better because I think Jalen Hurts will be more focused on ball security, and I think they'll clean that part of it up at least a little bit. So I have high hopes. Everybody should have high hopes for the offense. As far as what it looks like, they're clearly shifting gears with Kellen Moore. All we know about is Kellen Moore. We haven't even been able to speak to him yet because the Eagles haven't made him available. But you do know his history from Dallas and the Chargers, and he's an 11 personnel guy, 3 receivers, just like Nick, but he uses more motion. So we'll probably get that part involved. They'll look better. You know, fans seem to enjoy motion and equate that to creativity, which is not necessarily the truth. But, you know, if you window, Jim Schwartz would call it eyewash. You know, it's window dressing, but people like it. You can stress the defense and their discipline. So you should try it more than Nick. But how it's going to look and how it's going to be, in theory, you have Saquon Barkley here to take some of the load off Jalen Hurts. So that part should excite Philadelphia because they should be more willing to run the football, I would think, than just. But then again, you have A.J. Brown and freaking Devonta Smith. You know, Nick always says it's a nice problem to have. But when you say that, the term nice problem, Krause, still includes the word problem. And you got to keep everybody happy. And I think people just skate by that and say, it'll be fine. It'll be fine if you're winning. Nobody wants to be the a-hole who complains if you're winning games. You didn't hear a lot of complaints last year when the Eagles were 10-1. You heard a lot of complaints when the wheels came off. So, you know, are they winning games or losing games?
TBD. We'll see what happens. Statement of hope or statement of doubt. You get to define it based on who you are and what you believe. Birds 365 on a Masters Thursday morning here on the JAKIB YouTube channel. Thank you for everybody being part of the chat. We may even open up the chat to some questions for John in hour number 2. That might be a first.
It's a new era.
Yeah, new era.
Nice.
Birds 365.
Be freaking nice, or we'll shut it down.
So
again.
if you're in the chat and you have questions for John, we'll deal with that in hour number 2. We'll continue our conversation here on Birds 365. Back in a moment.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Moving into hour number 2 of Birds 365. By the way, Steve Ike in the chat, where do you go for mold remediation? How about DryTech, one of our partners? Reach out to DryTech, official partner, by the way, of the Philadelphia Eagles. Great guys. John, a little bit later on, we're going to open up some questions from the chat for you.
I hope mold hasn't gotten Bob Brookover. Come on.
Yeah,
Brooke.
no Bob Brookover today, although we'll take him if he's available from NJ.com. He's got some an interesting perspective, I'm sure, not only on the draft, but I know you wanted to talk with him about just Saquon and what that means. John, second round of the upcoming draft, the Eagles have 3 picks, 1 in the first, and then 3 in the second, correct?
2 in the second, 50 and 53. So they have 3 day 1 and day 2 picks as we start the process, 3 in the top 53. So 22, 50, 53 is where the Eagles start. Remember, if you're a betting man, I wouldn't say how he's going to pick 22, 50, and 53. He tends to move around and try to maximize everything he can potentially win. And whether that means number, I think most people, it doesn't necessarily mean number of picks. In other words, Quinyon Mitchell's the kid that I focused on in the first round, the cornerback from Toledo. Well, he's not going to be there at 22. So if the Eagles like him, they got to go up and get him. And they'll have to give up likely one of those second round picks to potentially go up. So they could use that route. On the other hand, I don't like that. I've said it pretty consistently. I think that is a weird spot for the Eagles because the value at 22 is probably going to be offensive tackle, but they don't need an offensive tackle immediately. Now, they could play the long game, and Howie has the luxury of doing that and say, we'll draft the ultimate replacement for Lane Johnson, try to start him at right guard maybe. But I was just talking to a former Eagle scout yesterday, and I'm trying to pull it up on my phone. And it kind of scared me because, the 2 guys I've been looking at for the Eagles at 22, Tyler Guyton, who's just a perfect fit to be the replacement for Lane Johnson because Lane has been mentoring him. He's an Oklahoma kid. He goes to Oklahoma. So Lane loves him. He's a natural right tackle. He works with him already. It's just a perfect fit. And And then Amarius Mims from Georgia. The Eagles obviously have loved Georgia players, and he's tremendously athletic. But he said, he doesn't see them as a fit and I'm reading it directly. I personally don't see either of them having that sort of flexibility, and it would definitely be a factor since they don't plan on either being an immediate starter. So there's an ex-scout saying he doesn't see their ability to move to guard. So that concerned me a little bit, to be honest. And if I'm the Eagles at 22, I might think about trading down if I can't get a targeted trade up. And then I think some of the other cornerbacks, whether it's somebody like Cooper DeJean, who's more of a versatile player. Some people think he's a corner safety. Kool-Aid McKinstry's a very good player, but he's got a Jones fracture in his foot. So that concerns me from a medical standpoint. Nate Wiggins is just too small. He looks like Devonta Smith playing cornerback. He's 173 pounds. I don't like Enos Rakestraw as a first-round pick. So I would kind of go – I'd trade down if I can't get Quinyon Mitchell. And if none of those offensive linemen can move inside to guard, I think you got to trade down.
What about trading up to get a win now contributor that could put this team back to where they were 2 years ago, a half away from winning the Super Bowl?
That's what Quinyon Mitchell is to me. Right, day one starter, outside corner. You're obviously old with Darius Slay and James Bradbury. And I think he could be that type of player on the defensive side of the football. But again, you're going to have to move up. How high? Probably in the 14 to 18 range, I would say, which is pretty significant. It's not easy. You don't just snap your fingers. One thing about trades, and I just said trade down, takes two to tango. You can't always trade up or trade down. And sometimes you're forced to stay in a position and take your best available player. But
well, they're answering the phone. Anybody's going to listen to whatever Howie or whoever's throwing something out, anybody's going to listen to it. I'll give you the 22nd pick, and I'll give you both picks in the second round to move up so you could get them. Is that a conversation Howie has?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, you're having constant conversations, but when you're on the clock, there's sometimes, not a deal there to be made. And that's a big part of the preparation. You want to have everything sort of all your ducks in a row. So if you have to move, you have a pretty good feeling of who wants to move up, who wants to move down. I keep hearing good things about this kid from Duke, Graham Barton, who's a guard, a natural guard. And the Eagles aren't going to take a natural guard at 22. I don't believe. I don't think they see the value in that position. But he can play a number of different positions as well. And that's where I talk about if you go from 22 to 29, pick up some extra draft capital, draft that kid. I think that would be a home run. But again, it's not sexy. Nobody's going to be excited by that. But I think it would be a very, very savvy move by the Eagles if they did something like that.
But is there a move that they could make that would put them back in the Super Bowl? Isn't that the first?
Well, no. I mean,
Isn't that the first priority, John? When you're this good and you're this close and you come within a half of winning the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago, and you start the previous season 10-1 or whatever it was before before everything imploded, and you feel as though your offense is better this year with Saquon than it was, and it's already loaded and talented, isn't that the next move to get to the bowl and win it? Or is it to take picks that are going to ultimately give you future years as replacements for veterans like Lane that are leaving? At what point does the win become the number one motivation for making a pick? Maybe it should never. I don't know. But that to me would seem like a logical thing to do if I'm the Eagles and I'm this close and my path to the Super Bowl is one player or a great piece, a missing piece. Who cares about everything else?
Well, I don't think that player exists in a draft. Maybe you can do that in free agency or the trade market with a more proven commodity. But I don't think you're getting someone who puts you over the top. I mean, the best players in this draft, whether, Caleb Williams is, most people grade him number one. Obviously, the Eagles don't need a quarterback. Obviously, he's going number one overall. He's not putting the Chicago Bears in the Super Bowl. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., whoever picks him, Chargers most likely, maybe the Cardinals, but the Cardinals will probably try to take advantage of one of those teams trying to trade up for a quarterback. Is he going to put the Cardinals in the Super Bowl? I don't think so.
Would he put the Eagles in the Super Bowl?
No. The Eagles have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. I mean, how many footballs do we have here? You need
we need 3 receivers.
Yeah, but again, the third receiver, and who's the third receiver in that grouping? And they're not going to be happy. I guarantee you that with the traffic. There's only so much traffic to go around. The other top players in this draft, Malik Neighbors, receiver, the kid from Washington is also received. Joe Alt, I personally love, as a left tackle. The Eagles just signed Jordan Mailata to a $70 million contract. Brock Bowers, the tight end, is great. Not a great defensive draft. The best defensive player, probably Dallas Turner from Alabama. He's probably going to go right in the 10 range. So it's going to be a while before a defensive player even gets picked. No, there's nobody who's putting anybody in the Super Bowl in the draft. You could argue a trade was the final piece of the puzzle in 2022, and that's A.J. Brown. Was the final piece of the puzzle for the Eagles that got him to the Super Bowl. And you can do that with veteran players who are proven, but look at C.J. Stroud. I mean, he did a tremendous job, one of the great rookie seasons ever for a quarterback. And he did a wonderful turnaround and has quickly turned Houston from a laughing stock to a legitimate playoff team. But he didn't take them near the Super Bowl. He took them to the playoffs. Nobody was threatened by them, certainly, or considered them a Super Bowl contender. Now, maybe they will be this season or next season if he continues to develop. But it's very hard for a rookie, any rookie, to be the final piece of the puzzle to a Super Bowl picture.
Birds 365 with NFL insider John McMullen. I paused there, John, because my hope, like most fans, I would assume, my hope is to do more or to get further than we've been and to be better than last season and to collapse and not duplicate what we just did. And I just feel as though that window is closing on the core of the roster that came within 2 quarters of winning the Super Bowl, to last season, to going into 2024. So instead of getting closer, I feel as though the window, we're running out of room with the window. And at that point, it's a coaching change, it's a quarterback change, it's a roster turnover, and it's everything that starts when you do everything all over again. I mean, I'm thinking of Jalen Hurts. When Jalen Hurts, and I remember listening and watching and actually doing some of the reports, some of the football 24/7 reports that we did with Jalen in camp the season prior to his breakout season. And the transition that occurred was monumental. If you go back and listen to Football 24/7 with John McMullen in the year previous to the year that they went to the Super Bowl, up to and even last year, that progression of change, John, was incredible for Jalen, was monumental. Now, does it need to get better? Or is it everyone else or other contributors that need to get them over the hump?
Well, it's a team game. It's the ultimate team game. Yeah, I do think I hate when people boil it down to quarterback versus quarterback. There are a million ways to win a football game, but when you have high level quarterback play, it creates your margin of error. It increases it greatly. Jalen Hurts was runner up to the MVP in 2022. And you can argue he was the best player on the field. And I have argued he was the best player on the field in Super Bowl 52. He had a phenomenal year. Hassan Reddick had a phenomenal year defensively. Single-handedly wrecked the NFC Championship game. 19 and a half sacks through the Super Bowl. You do have that. Defensively, there were so many defenders who had career years. From C.J. Gardner-Johnson to Marcus Epps to T.J. Edwards and Kaiser White and James Bradbury, on and on and on and on. It was a special season, 2022. And I remember talking to Jody leading into last season. The expectations were so outrageous. And I said, you're probably not going to have career seasons are career seasons for a reason. You generally don't have people say they had their best season ever, and then the next year they have a better season, especially when it comes to, sometimes that happens with big time players. But when it comes to more, and I don't want to call them average, but average players, I'm a big TJ Edwards fan, but you hear many Eagles fans, it's TJ Edwards. Well, he's a really good player, but was he going to have another year like he had in 2022? Probably not. Marcus Epps? Probably not. CJ? Probably not. And it all came to fruition. Some of them not here. Those three weren't here. But their replacements did not live up to what they played like in the Super Bowl season. So to assume you're just going back to the Super Bowl, it's really, really hard. One of the things that I still shake my head today is so many people didn't regard that as an accomplishment. It's an accomplishment to make the Super Bowl. I get the disappointment over losing. I get that. But it is really, really hard to make the Super Bowl. And you saw it last year. The Eagles started 10-1. They looked like a juggernaut coming off a Super Bowl, and then it all fell apart because the difference between the best NFL team and the worst NFL team isn't as drastic as you think it is from a talent perspective. Basically, 2, 3, maybe 4 guys. Certainly the quarterback, and then you might have a couple superstars. And that's why you have a team like Houston who can turn it around so quickly because they found a quarterback.
We'll see who the Eagles find or pick in the draft. A lot of conversation, a lot of speculation on the other side of the break. For the very first time, it's a new Birds 365. We will entertain your questions for Johnny Mack. If you're in the chat, okay. If you don't want to put a question out there, but we roll along here on the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel with Birds 365, hour number 2. So I do want to remind you again as we go into the commercial break, reach out to Fran and Jim at Del Val Insurance to save up to 40% on your car insurance. Here's what it's about. It's not about the money. It's about having the right coverage and then saving dollars. Call Del Val Insurance right now, 215-354-0122. Tell them you're a fan or a friend of JAKIB Sports.
My name is Fran Salerno. I'm a managing director here at Del Val Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
And welcome back, everyone, to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us as we move into year 4 of Birds 365 with NFL insider John McMullen. And stay connected to JAKIB as we'll bring you some updates and some additional announcements, some information about our draft show coming up on the 25th, and that's where most of the conversation is right now. John, what are the Eagles what are the Eagles going to do with that 22nd pick, assuming they make the 22nd pick, or they use that pick with some of the other draft capital that they have, and suggested potentially they will do. But the one most glaring area of attention is linebacker. Agree or disagree? There we go, John. What do you think? John, do you think we will address the linebacker position with one of our first 3 picks? What do you think, John?
I think it's going to be difficult. Do I think they should? Yes. We all know the Eagles don't value the position off-ball linebacker, so stacked linebacker, all that much. And right now they're set to enter the season with Nakobe Dean and Devin White as the incumbent starters. The one guy I think he would be a fit is Edgerrin Cooper, more from the coverage perspective. That's what the Eagles are going to be looking for. And I think he would be the best fit. Would they make that leap at 50 and 53? I don't think so. And there's a good chance he's not even going to be there at that particular spot. There's some other kids, Trevin Wallace from Kentucky. The problem is they do have that big drop off from 50 and 53 to 120. And you're probably not going to get a Peyton Wilson, a Wallace, a Cooper, certainly not a Cooper. Maybe Jalen Ford. I brought that name up, kid from Texas at 120. I think you're more likely. And by the way, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., I think because of his name locally, obviously, I think a lot of people, and there was some hype on him being a potential day 2 pick. I don't think he's going to be a day 2 pick. I think he might fall into day 3. And who knows, maybe that would excite people to get another Trotter in town. But they're going to count on Nakobe Dean. And
should they count on Nakobe Dean, John?
I don't know how you can. I love the kid. He's smart. But he hasn't proven that he can stay on the field. The best ability is availability, as Chip Kelly used to say, and it's 100% correct. He's got these foot problems. He's got trouble finding the right cleats. And he's undersized. He's tremendously undersized. Now, Devin White, he was a former top 5 pick, obviously, and he didn't play like it in Tampa, but he's got tremendous athleticism. Maybe Vic Fangio can unlock something in there, and that can help him. They're going to take a linebacker. Are they going to take a linebacker in those first 3 picks? I hope so, but my bet would be against it.
On the Eagles side.
Yeah.
Future of Men question for John. Will Kellen Moore try and replicate the 2022 Jalen Hurts offense or improve the 2023 offense? Good question. That's what I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to understand 2022 in totality versus 2023. Essentially, the
2022 offense and the 2023 offense were the same offense.
Same offense.
Yeah, that was part of the problem. As teams adjusted, the Eagles didn't adjust back. So yeah, it's going to be different from both. And again, Nick is always bottom 5, actually bottom 2, sometimes bottom when it comes to using motion in his offenses. Kellen Moore's always been top 10. So you're going to see more of that eye wash, more motion, try to test or stress the defense in that way. That's going to be probably the biggest difference that's most noticeable. But as I said, they're both 11 personnel guys, so they both want 3 receivers on the field the vast majority of the time. And I'm talking about Nick and Kellen Moore, so that part will be similar. I think you would be crazy to eliminate the +1 aspect of Jalen Hurts' impact on the offense. That part of it, I think, isn't good. And Bob Brookover thought it was PM, so that's Bob. So Bob Brookover thought it was PM, so I apologize. But where was I, Krause? Oh, the offense. Yeah, it's going to be different, and the motion is going to be the most obvious to the fan base as far as it's all about execution. I hate that. I mean, and I always go back to Jimmy Johnson with the Cowboys. They ran 3 stinking running plays. Everybody knew what was coming, and they couldn't stop them because they had the best offensive line, they had the best running back, and everybody knew what was coming. If you watch some NFL film stuff, and last year it was Christian McCaffrey, who was on, I believe, the Manning cast, and he was calling out Eagles plays, and people lost their mind. And I said, guess what? Christian McCaffrey can call out everybody's plays. Search for Luke Kuechly, the old Carolina linebacker. His entire career, he was calling out everybody's plays in advance. That's how smart he was. That's how able he was to identify things. If the other team executes, it doesn't matter. And you can know what's going on. So it's about execution. I always say, and I've said this to Jody, and I've said it to you over the years many times, whether they know it or not, people do not judge play calls. They judge play results. And I always had this discussion with Doug Peterson. Sometimes players would, make a bad Doug Peterson play call work. And sometimes he had the greatest play call dialed up for a certain situation, and nobody knew it because maybe the left guard missed a block. Nobody knew it was the perfect play call because the execution wasn't there. So to me, it's more about the teaching during the week and making sure everybody is on the same page. And then the second part where Kellen Moore's brought in answers so-called blitz beaters, and that has to do with the quarterback as well, because I think that was so overemphasized last season. Hot routes. There's not an offense in high school that doesn't have hot routes. And there was this narrative, oh, the Eagles don't have hot routes. Yes, they do. The quarterback and the receiver got to be on the same page and reading the same thing. And that's where the teaching and the execution part of it comes in.
Is Nick Sirianni, John, smart enough to know what he doesn't know and let Kellen Moore call and run and manage this offense start to finish without getting involved?
Yeah, that's a big question. I don't know. It's been my biggest question because for years, and Nick Sirianni, to the point of over, and he has said consistently, as long as I'm here, this is going to be my offense. And all of a sudden, that changed, and it became our offense. In fact, I remember his famous quote when he was talking to us beat guys. He said, it doesn't matter how he calls the plays, Jeffrey, Dom, Big Dom, Joe Krause, John McMullen, the people on the stream, it's going to be my offense. Well, Nick's also a politician, as I said, and he realized if he walked into Jeffrey Lurie's office after that collapse and wasn't amenable to changing certain things, he probably wouldn't have a job. So that is probably going to be the biggest story of the Philadelphia Eagles 2024 season, how Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore mesh together, because Nick Sirianni is going to want an impact on the offense, and we'll see how much rope Kellen Moore gets. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
I mean, I'd give him all the rope he needs. Stand back, put your chest out, and let him do his job. And I've heard you say this many times, the head coach is the CEO of the football.
Yeah, I'd like CEO coaches. I've always liked CEO coaches. And Nick Sirianni has been a CEO coach since year one when he gave up play calling to Shane Steichen. But I will say this about Nick's offense. It was number 3 in the NFL in 2022. It's number 8 last year, I believe. You usually don't fire top 10 offensives. The offensive mind. That's usually not the way you do business. No. Did it look good at the end of the season? No, it did not. I'm not trying to downplay that, but typically over the course of a season, if you have a top 10 offense, you normally don't fire the coordinator or the head coach. In this case, Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni. But the expectations were so enormous. They overwhelmed that top. It's funny, Krause. They were better last season on third down offense than they were in the Super Bowl season. They were better in fourth down offense than they were in the Super Bowl season. Situational football, which Nick stresses, they were really good at. But the expectations overwhelmed it.
Well, the expectation or the execution? The execution. Right?
Well, if you're better,
situational football means you've executed and you put yourself in a position to make a play. And
I'm saying over the course of an entire season, they were better last year in certain aspects offensively. Yeah. The problem last year was defense and turnovers. The Eagles were very good, and even at the end of the 2022 season, they were outrageously good in plus minus early, and even then started regressing to the mean. Last season, they turned the football over way too much. That was the biggest. That was the only difference. Until the collapse really late in the season. Now, when A.J. Brown went down in the Giants game, and obviously but they're not the same offense when A.J.'s not on the field. And you go back to 2021, They had some good. AJ was the key to it all. When you talk about getting over the top, that is the most glaring example of a player who puts you over the top, because everything on that offense falls into place when he's out there. Devonta Smith, great number 2 receiver. Is he great number 1? He's not.
Mm-hmm.
Great number 2, following the pace. Everything fell into place when they got A.J. Brown. And when they didn't have him in the playoffs, it got ugly again. So for those, be very wary for those who don't want A.J. Brown long term, because he's been, and I say it all the time, he is the best pure football player on the Philadelphia Eagles, and he has been since he got here.
We started the show with conversation about Devonta and should the Eagles, or will the Eagles give him a long-term deal and get it done now? How important do you think it is for that to happen, or does it really matter, John? Does it matter if they get it? Does Devonta play differently?
No.
If he doesn't sign now? Does it change anything at all in the offense and the chemistry of the offense, in the locker room, in AJ's psyche? Does it really matter, other than the risk, other than, I don't mean to make light of it, the risk of injury would be the one factor I would assume that would be a consideration for Devonta. But other than that, does it matter?
No, I don't think it matters. There's still time. And Devonta knows the Eagles are trying to get something done. So there isn't any concern from that part of it. This is all about Devonta Smith, and if he wants to bet on himself, as I said earlier in the show. If he wants to wait for Justin Jefferson to reset the wide receiver market, which will raise his price and raise everybody's price moving forward, completely up to him. If he wanted to sign a big money extension, the Eagles will sign that document today. But
that document will not be a penny.
Can't go above
more
AJ
than AJ Brown's.
Can't go above AJ, because then you create problems. So, but that's still significant money. $25 million a year. And I see long term, no, you probably can't keep both. And long term, they're probably going to keep Devonta. Is that the right decision? That's why also wide receivers a low key important part of this draft. Not only as the third receiver, they need to upgrade the third receiver position, because I don't think anybody's sitting there saying Paris Campbell's the answer as the third receiver. He might be a little bit better than Quez Watkins, but you still want to get better. But I'm talking long term. So, 50, 53, probably even 22, low key. If somebody like Brian Thomas is there at 22, it wouldn't shock me if the Eagles took him. The other LSU receiver, Malik Neighbors, is going to be a top 10 pick, most likely. Brian Thomas is the other LSU. If he's there at 22, it wouldn't completely shock me if the Eagles, went that direction for long term. And then 50, 53, there's a bunch of guys. Keon Coleman can't run supposedly, but boy, he can play. And that was some of the knocks. If you can get him at 50 or 53 as a potential future, he's 6'3", 213. I'll never compare anybody to AJ, but that could be a potential replacement down the line. Wide receivers under reported need, because it's going to be very difficult to keep AJ and Devonta long term, because they're both going to make. Remember, AJ's already outperformed his $25 million contract, so he's going to want more than that.
Yeah, when does he get that, John? When does that conversation start?
Well, that again, Jefferson, Chase, when they sign, the guys like AJ are going to be up in the 30 million range. And you probably can't keep both. That's just the reality.
AJ does what? AJ's new deal, his $100 million deal is what? Signed through what?
Let me pull that up. He signed that. I think he had the final year. Final year of his deal when they picked him up, but let's see. He is under contract through 2026, and then there's a couple void years. But
so 25 is a holdout year.
Yeah, something's going to have to be done before that, and especially when, as I said, Jefferson and Chase are going to reset the market, and AJ's not those guys, but he's right underneath. So if Jefferson gets 33, say, he's going to be a $30 million player.
And in the pyramid, AJ Brown makes Devonta Smith a better number 2, and Devonta is not a number 1.
Well, you saw him as a number 1 now. He's got the potential to get there. Is he got the potential to be a number 1 like AJ Brown is a number 1? I doubt that.
Well, I mean, even if you're asking that question and you're the Eagles, you're not going to pay him you're not going to pay him that kind of money if you don't know whether he can do the job or not.
Well,
listen, he's a great player. I'm not saying he's not. What I'm saying is,
this
in
has
the context
nothing...
of how you described it, I'm wondering, does it make sense to sign Devonta Smith? If signing Devonta Smith means you're going to lose AJ Brown, because that's what it sounds like to me. If you sign Devonta, AJ's gone, or he's in a holdout. He's a holdout next year for sure. Whether or not they decide to renegotiate his deal or not.
The problem is, I think there's this disconnect with AJ because of his. I'm trying to be very cautious here because of his personality, whatever you want to describe it. People think he's, at times they think he's a troublemaker. He's not. But at times they think he is because, and he spoke about this in the off season. He wants to win. He's very vocal. He takes his status as a team captain very seriously. He calls people out when he thinks they're not performing at the level they should be performing at. Whether you want to call that high maintenance, whether you want to call it the wide receiver diva, Devontae's not like that. Devontae's just, I'm going to do my job. Head down, do my job. Look, I'm on record, and I'll say it again. AJ Brown is the best pure football player on the Philadelphia Eagles. Would I want to give up AJ Brown? Hell no. You saw this offense pre-AJ Brown. Sometimes they had some good games. Sometimes they had some bad games. They have some good players. They have a great offensive line. They'll have Saquon Barkley. They will not be the same without AJ Brown. You see it with AJ Brown, completely different. He's the final piece of the puzzle. I would keep him at all costs. I don't think the Eagles are of that same mindset.
Back to the question then. Given that statement, if the Eagles don't think that, or they question whether that's true or not, what do you do with Devonta? Do you sign him now or try and you sign him now? If the Eagles want to sign him, they can sign him. They can put the money in front of him that would get the deal done. That's correct, right? That's true.
And they're trying to. They're
Right.
trying
So
to because they want to sign him before Jefferson and Chase sign because
right.
they
So
know
and
the
that's
money's just going
25, and
up.
that's 25 mil a year, John,
Well, I
or
think,
whatever it is, however it's structured.
yeah, I think if they would try to get 20 plus. I don't know if they get up to 25. I'm saying they can't go over 25. Absolutely can't. I don't think he's a $25 million player. I think he's a very good player. I think they should be able to get him a little bit cheaper than that, but we'll see if he wants to bet on himself. Remember, when I say he's not a $25 million player, I say that before Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase have signed their contracts. After they sign them, it might be a different conversation because they're going to raise that market.
Who's better, Devonta Smith or CD Lamb?
CD Lamb. Yeah, Devontae's not. There's if you're talking about top 5 receivers in football, you're probably talking about Jefferson. You're talking about Chase. You're talking about CD Lamb, AJ. Probably missing one or two. Yeah, Devontae's very good, but he's not in that conversation.
Well, then if that's the case, and I'm the Eagles, I'm not signing him because
Well, yeah,
to me,
no.
to me, and I
It's a
love
good
the
idea. It's a good idea to keep good players. He's a very good player.
very, very good player, but every action has a reaction. The minute they sign him for whatever that amount ultimately is in the agreement or in the contract, it changes their next move and puts them in a position where they could lose AJ Brown.
Well, and remember,
That
I get
accurate?
I get caught up in this as well, and sometimes I'm wrong. And one of the chatters brought up that nobody's ever paid 2 receivers 25 million, which is the case. But that also the salary cap has never been higher than it is right now, and it exploded this year, and it's going to continue to explode moving forward because the new TV deals will start to take over, and it's just going up and up and up and up. So there's going to be more ability to pay that kind of money to do different. And the Eagles are often first. So while I doubt it, I won't put it completely out of the question that the Eagles will keep both. They will certainly keep Devonta Smith. If one is going to leave, it's going to be AJ Brown because his price tag is going to be enormous. And who knows what happens? Could be an injury, could be part of the problem when people think he's complaining, he's not complaining. All this comes into the equation, but the price tag is going to be enormous when AJ Brown is up for his next deal.
Do you avoid all of that in the 2024 season, John, by not signing Devonta Smith? Do you avoid all that noise, all that speculation, all of that
No,
assumption?
I don't think
Does
Devontae
it factor into it at all or no?
No, I think the Eagles have already identified Devontae as a foundational piece, and they want a deal done as quickly as possible, similar to Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata, because they know the earlier you do it, the cheaper it is.
Yeah,
They
but
know.
this comes with the ramification of by doing it, you put yourself in a position where you could lose the number one offensive player in your roster.
Well, to those who
You're not going to lose him now, but
no, to those who think Devontae's AJ, no, I disagree with you. It's not an insult to Devonta Smith. It's just, and if the Eagles believe that, they're nuts too. I don't think they believe that, but there are some extenuating circumstances with AJ, fair or unfair. And we've already been through it, just calling up WIP and saying, he's very probably too sensitive, I would say. He's very honest. And, Fletcher Cox talked about it. You got to have a thick skin to play in Philadelphia. He said it, I think, 3 times during his retirement press conference. So there are some off the field things that they have to deal with AJ that they don't have to deal with Devonta Smith. And I think that factors into it.
Birds 365 with John McMullen, Joe Krause riding in the chair today. I'll be right back here tomorrow with Johnny Mack, and then stay tuned to the JAKIB YouTube channel for some updates on some programming, our draft information, and our big draft show. We'll have some details about that because it is coming, John. What happens between now, our last thing before we run out of time here, what happens between now over the next 2 weeks? What's happening in Howie's office? Is it what's going on? Is it posturing? Is it reach out? What's he doing?
Most of the draft work is done. You got a few more top 30 visits and local pro day coming up, but most of the heavy lifting is done. Most of the plan is in place. And then it's just about similar to what we were talking about offensively, executing it. And you try to do as much, what you're doing in those final 2 weeks is making the phone calls to other GMs around the league. Hey, would you be willing to move up in this scenario? Would you be willing to move down? A lot of teams are like set. No, we're going to take this guy in this particular position. So you want all those ducks in a row before draft night. So when draft night is there, who to call immediately, who wants to move up, who wants to move down. So that's what he's sort of doing. The board is pretty much set by this point. It's been set for a while. You might have a few questions on a few prospects you want to answer over the past couple of days. There may be some medical stuff. Sometimes, we were talking to Matt Manacharian last week. It was a former scout with the Browns and the Saints. And he said, from their perspective, from the scouting perspective, the draft board's done after basically the college all-star games. And then the coaches come in and they got their ideas, and the medical staff come in, and you got to pull people down because they say, oh, this is not good. And even the owner, occasionally Jeffrey Lurie will come in and say, hey, that JJ Arcega-Whiteside is really impressive. And so you have all these different things, and it's Howie's job to mesh them all together.
I remember the draft show. We were down at Topgolf in Ocean when I think the trade with AJ came. Did it come before the draft actually got started that year or not?
Everything right. I don't believe so. No, I think it was.
Was it before? Was it leading up to the? When did that?
No. It was draft night. It was
draft night. Did that trade happen inside the first round when the draft was?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
I don't remember if it did or didn't.
It was day one. Yeah. Yep. It was during the first round of the draft. Yeah. And that was, that was a big deal. And that you were talking about earlier, Krause, about a player, making you into a Super Bowl team. And that's the best example of it.
That's what I want, John. I want
and
that
that's but that's a veteran player. And what are the odds that, Brown was traded for the 18th overall pick in the 2022 draft, and the Titans used that pick on Treylon Burks, who has not worked out. And then they agreed to the 4-year, $100 million extension. 18th pick in the draft. They turned the 18th pick in the draft, and they also, I think they gave up the 3rd round pick as well, but into A.J. Brown. What are the odds you're getting A.J. Brown with 18th in the draft? Certainly not right away.
Right.
And that's, to say the least. And by the way, that trade got the Titans GM fired, and rightfully so.
Our Thursday edition, year number 4 of Birds 365. Thanks, everyone, for being a part of the broadcast today. Johnny Mack, thanks to you. We salute Jody Mack for his first 3 years as part of Birds 365. I'll be right back here with Johnny Mack tomorrow, and then look ahead as we'll have some announcements and some other thoughts about our draft show, and we'll make those on the program next week. Thank you, Johnny Mack. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Krause. Apologize. Looking at a text message from Brookie. So hopefully we'll get Rob Brook over quickly. So
just put the AM on the time when you send it to him.
Oh, I put the AM on the time. It's all Brookie.
All right, good stuff. And thank you for your questions for John. It was nice to get some engagement from the audience as part of Birds 365. See you next time, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.